live. All right. All right. So my name is Chris Berry, certified financial planner, certified outlaw attorney with Castle Wealth Group, and we do these workshops once a week. We call these our wisdom webinars, where it's a chance to answer any questions, whether legal, financial, tax related. Again, it's general information, but we answer your questions live. And I have people submit questions ahead of time, as well as submit questions while I am presenting. So if you do have a question, something floating around in your head, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'll get going. And I always like to start with positive focus, something positive that happened within the last week. And for me, something positive, two things. One, personal, went to the Detroit Zoo. They have a lights exhibit. So I took my parents, my wife and kids. And so we walked around the Detroit Zoo, saw the Christmas lights. So that was kind of nice. And then a professional one is we're taking the team out to our Christmas dinner tonight. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that. Then we're taking some time off next week. So pretty excited for that. All right. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. And again, if you do have questions, please make sure to put it in the Q&A because I didn't have a lot submitted ahead of time. So it might be a pretty quick call today. So hit this button. Whoops, don't hit that button, this button. All right, so now we should be seeing my screen. Again, this is personal, or if you want to see how this personally affects you, feel free to schedule some time with us. But with that, we'll go ahead and get into the questions. All right, so first one, we own rental property, how should it be titled? And I'm gonna give my kind of annoying answer, it depends. But here's how we look at it. So rental properties, we need to differentiate versus like your personal residence. So personal residence, you maintain a homestead exemption. So that should either be in your name or probably we should do a ladybird deed. So it goes into the trust upon death, or if you set up an asset protection trust, that should be in an asset protection trust. But rentals, we call these hot assets because you could have a slip and fall on your rental. Or I think I've shared this. I had a woman this year come into my office and she was renting to her son who wasn't paying rent, but living there. Her son invited a friend, a female friend over who ended up getting her face bitten by a dog and then suing mom for about $750,000. And all of that could have been avoided had they set this up properly. So rental properties, we always consider them a hot asset. So what we recommend is that we build some type of wall around that hot asset or put it like in a box. And a lot of times what we do is we put it into a limited liability company. LLC, limited liability company. So now if there's a slip and fall, they can only take the rental property. They can't take what's in your personal name. And then if you have an asset protection trust, then what we would do is you have your primary residence in the trust, but then we would create the LLC, which would also be in the trust. And then this is where you would put that hot asset of the rental property inside of the LLC. So now you're protected against two types of liability. One, the hot asset. So if someone has a slip and fall, they can only take what's inside of the LLC. And then if you were to need, say, if you were to get sued, whatever's in the trust would be protected. And then why a lot of people do the asset protection trust is that also if all of a sudden you need a long-term care cost, which could run $8,000 to $12,000 a month, if it's in the trust, then it's shielded and protected. So if you own rental property and you plan on keeping it for a period of time, typically we're going to recommend a LLC. Certain situations, we might do a separate trust where like I have some clients where they have kind of like a business interest on their primary residence. So we can put it into an LLC. Like if you have a apple orchard and you sell like cider and it's on your primary residence, then we would set up the asset protection trust to protect against personal liability. But then your primary residence is kind of a concern. So we can't put that into a LLC, otherwise that would uncap it for property taxes. It wouldn't qualify as a homestead. So we actually do like a mini asset protection trust inside of an asset protection trust. So it kind of really depends. But that rental property, think of that as a hot asset. We need to make sure that, God forbid, something happens like a dog bite or slip and fall. We don't want that to come after you. Another way we could do it is if you have multiple rentals. Like I have one client that bought up like 40 pieces of property in Flint when the Flint water crisis happened. We might want to put each one into its own LLC, like a series of LLCs. So now if there's a slip and fall on one, it can take down one, but the other two would be protected. So that's where rental properties, a lot of times we're looking at LLCs, limited liability companies. And so we would set up a real estate, how we would do it, we'd set up a real estate LLC, deed the property to the LLC, and then we would assign that to the trust. So that's typically how we handle like rentals or second pieces of property. All right. So Bill, I saw your question. I'll get to that in a second. All right, any other questions on this? No, good. All right. Number two. So we talked about IUL before. So this person writes in, why should we consider IUL versus a Roth? IUL seems complicated. I would agree with that. We don't need insurance. A lot of times you don't need insurance. So what's so special about these two things? So first of all, and we've talked about this before, we need to understand taxes. So we have non-qualified assets, we have tax deferred, and then we have tax-free. And so two big tax issues. One is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which runs from 18 to 2025. And President Biden's Build Back America plan, that's been stalling out. So this is still in effect, this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And what this means in 2025, taxes are going up 3 to 4% across the board. Okay, so that's first thing. And that means the value of your IRAs, which are and 401ks are going down that much. The other big concern is now we're $29 trillion in debt. So a lot of people think taxes have to go up even higher in the future, right? Because we're at one of the lowest historical marginal tax brackets. So that means what can we do inside of this tax-free bucket? And that's where Roths come into play and cash value life insurance. Cash value life insurance qualify under 7702 of the tax code, where the growth on these are tax-free if they're set up properly. So that's why people are looking to these two vehicles, Roth IRAs and cash value life insurance, as tax-free growth vehicles. Now, why would you consider IUL versus a Roth? So let's look at IUL versus Roth. Both are good tools. Both of them grow tax-free. So tax-free, so that's good. IULs are tied to an index where they grow like this. Market goes down, you don't lose anything. Market goes up, you collect the upside of the market. Roths, not necessarily bad, but just understand they're tied to the market. So you're going to be looking more like that. Not saying one's better than the other. They just grow differently. IUL, big advantage here is it can be asset protected. Meaning if we have an asset protection trust, what can go in here? Real estate, non-qualified funds, IUL. What cannot go in is IRAs and Roths. Okay. So we can't build in the asset protection around a Roth. We can't protect against nursing home or long-term care costs. Another advantage of the IUL is, in addition to the income, you can get tax-free income, you can get tax-free long-term care benefits, and you can get tax-free death benefits versus the Roth. It's just, the Roth is really just tax-free growth. So income, and then if you pass away, it could be a death benefit. And then with the IUL, you also get leverage. So I just got off a call with a client, and we were looking at $500,000 into a Roth versus $500,000 into an IUL. And the $500,000 into the IUL immediately is turned into about $1.2 million of all tax-free income, long-term care benefits, or a death benefit. Versus the Roth, you just have to rely upon the growth to accomplish that. So I'm not saying one's better than the other. Like, I'm a big fan of diversification, but that's why sometimes we might look at IUL. Advantage of the Roth, simple, easy, quick. Disadvantage of the IUL, it's more complicated. Usually takes months to set up. So it's more of an advanced planning strategy. So most people, they kind of default to looking to tax-free first, but depending on your situation, IUL may make sense. So yeah, so that's why you might want to consider a IUL. All right, then this is the last question submitted. So if you do have more questions, feel free to put it in. So question number 3 is iBond. So this is a hot topic right now. And the question is, do you recommend iBonds? And the answer to this is, it depends. I know it's frustrating, but as a fiduciary and attorney, I always have to act in your best interest. So there's no like perfect tool or anything out there. But here's the concern. So big thing, and we've talked about this even on this webinar or previous webinars, big concern right now is inflation, where like your Social Security is going up about 6%, and they're talking about inflation growing about 6%. So if you have lazy money, so this is money sitting at the bank or that's liquid and safe, you're probably earning maybe 1% if you're very lucky. And if inflation is at 6%, you're losing money, and you're losing money slowly and safely. So here's where we have 2 tools to combat this. One is a specific tool. It's kind of unique. It's called Legacy Excel. And what it is, it's something that's liquid, but you're looking at probably a 5 to maybe 8% rate of return. Technically, it's an insurance product, but you can access it after a year with no surrender charges or anything like that. So it is a liquidity play and still getting a good rate of return. This is really for people who are over 59 and a half. So you gotta be 59 plus. And then the other thing is, now we have these iBonds. These have been around for a while, but right now iBonds from now till April 2021, you can get a 7.2% rate of return on this. So it resets biannually. So every 6 months, the interest rate every 6 months is 3.65%, which should add up to 7.2% annually. And it's guaranteed, which is awesome. And it is state tax free, not federally, but state tax free, which is pretty darn cool. Now, the downside of this is you can only put in $10,000 per person. So like if you have $100,000 sitting in cash, you can't put it all into iBonds. But if you have, say, $10,000 or $20,000, or if you're married, maybe more, you're not going to use the money for say a year, then iBond makes a lot of sense. Now, typically they're on a 5-year chassis. If you do take it out prior to that, then you're going to have to sacrifice a couple months of interest, but still it's going to be better than having the money sitting in just savings. So I myself, I have some iBonds. I purchased some a couple of weeks ago, and then this 7.2% rate is from November of this year to April of 2022. So if you have a little bit of lazy money sitting around, what you could do is put in, if you're individual, put in 10,000 now, and then another 10,000 in January. And then if you're married, you could potentially double it. And we don't do these, but you just go to Treasury Direct, just go to the government directly and you open up an account right there. So as a tool, I'm a fan of them if it makes sense. I myself have some iBonds. I got some iBonds. Again, what's great about them is you're getting a guaranteed 7.2%, which is pretty unheard of. And this just tells you that inflation is a big deal. So I would start with the iBonds. If you have more than say $10,000 or $20,000, you're looking to invest in something safe and liquid, then reach out to us and we might look at some of these other tools. But yeah, you have 20,000 sitting around. iBond certainly may make sense if it's something that you're not going to touch for about a year or so, because it's a guaranteed 7% rate of return, which again, you don't see those very often. But again, it's not like if you have 200,000, or I have clients that have sold a business, they have $1 million sitting in cash, iBond's not going to move the needle. But if you have $10,000, $20,000 sitting there in lazy money, you're looking for something to do with that, then an iBond may make sense. If you have more than that, then there's some other tools that are available. But yeah, iBonds at 7.2%, it's better than having the money just sitting in cash. So I think it certainly makes sense as a tool. And you just go to Treasury Direct, takes you about 10 minutes to set up an account, and you can go from there. But yeah, with the inflation, I wouldn't lock yourself up into like CDs or anything like that right now. Anything that has a fixed rate of return, other than these iBonds, which are 7.2%. But again, you're maxed out at $10,000 per year for individual. So if you have 200,000 that you're looking at sitting in cash and you don't want it sitting there, then iBond is a drop in the bucket. That's where we look to some of the other tools like that Legacy Excel tool, which isn't a guaranteed 5 to 7, 8%, but it is completely liquid. You can cash out at any time, and you can get a better rate of return than just having the money sitting in cash. So hopefully that was helpful. All right. Any other questions? If you have questions, please put it into the Q&A. Answered that, and okay. All right. Well, that is it for this week. And I'm just looking next week. What are we doing next week? Yeah, we'll just keep going. So next week we'll have our wisdom webinar at the same time, and I thought I was going to be out of town, but I won't be for next Wednesday, or the Wednesday after, so January 5th. So we'll just keep on moving. Oh, here we go. Can a person's joint trust own? Can't you also buy $50,000 of iBonds with a tax refund? Yeah, so you can use your tax refund to get iBonds as well. Can a person's joint trust own the iBond? If so, can one do spouses? Yeah. So if it is a separate entity like a trust, you could also get another $10,000 worth of iBonds as well. So you can kind of rig the system a little bit. But yeah, iBonds, if you have a little bit of lazy money sitting around, then iBonds aren't a bad deal right now. So yeah, you're going to get guaranteed 7.2% rate of return, which is pretty darn good. You don't see that really guaranteed anywhere else. So that's a good opportunity. So we actually sent out an email on lazy money, and for anyone that replied, that was one of the things we recommended is, hey, if you got a little bit of money sitting around, look at those iBonds. If you have more money, then there's some other options there. So, all right, any other questions? All right, going once, going twice. Sold. All right. Well, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and if I don't talk to you, Happy New Year. But we will be on next Wednesday at the same time. So if you do have additional questions, feel free to submit them. Otherwise, have a great